Hello, my friends. Welcome to me, your host, Christian Watson. It is good to be back with you guys here today. So, $1.9 trillion. $1.9 trillion. That is the price tag of the U.S. government's latest spending splurge that today, on March 11th, 2021, Thursday, will be headed towards Joe Biden's desk for his signature, in which it will be signed in a public press conference. Well, a public signing conference. Hopefully it's a press conference, because he hasn't had one of those in a very long while, and people are kind of getting a little bit concerned. But a public conference. Now, for many people, this bill, the passage of this bill, is an indisputable victory for everyone who has been either evicted or about to be evicted, for everyone who has been out of work for many, many months, for everyone who has been teetering on the brink of material destitution. This bill is a victory for them, or so it is posed that way. One of the main reasons why this bill has been called a success is because it is oftentimes referred to as bipartisan. A bipartisan bill. Now, of course, in the House, it wasn't very bipartisan at all. I mean, it was actually quite split down party lines. But in the Senate, when it was passed, it was pretty much a bipartisan effort, in which many Republicans got on board. And bipartisanship, my friends, has been one of the most primary excuses, or perhaps one of the most primary talking points used to advance a certain cause. Comprehensive immigration reform, bipartisan. Common sense gun law, bipartisan. There are so many ideas whose qualities are obscured under the shield, under the cloak of bipartisanship. Because it goes like this. If people from two different paradigms can come together on one issue, there must be something to be said for both sides of those issues to be met and to be taken care of in that package. This, in my opinion, is an abbreviated form of the mean, an abbreviated form of the idea that balance is the primary quality in life that will make you happy or make things go good for you. And this is an idea, now obviously in a different way, but so this is an idea that forms a current in the Aristotelian philosophy. And I do not think that most politicians in America or anywhere else have been reading Aristotle's Politics or the Nicomachean Ethics, and have been doing disquisitions on how to apply the Nicomachean Ethics of the politics to political reality. But I do think that this emphasis on balance and bipartisanship, when it benefits the parties, by the way, this is not a universal emphasis. For Aristotle, if you're going to be balanced, you have to be balanced in every area of life. His ethics is predicated upon this idea that there is a mean between two extremes, and the vice is deficiency, and the other vice is excess, and that to get everything for Aristotle, and he extrapolates upon this in Book 5 of the Aristotelian Nicomachean Ethics, to get anything for Aristotle, to either get justice, to get political stability, for Aristotle, it all comes down to the mean. For Aristotle, corrective justice requires a mean, a mediator there, to look at both sides and try to figure out, okay, what's best in the middle. I'm obviously grossly oversimplifying Aristotle's political theory, but it basically comes down to the mean. And the mean is supposed to get us to a virtuous life and a virtuous society. Now, again, as I mentioned before, I do not think most politicians are using the mean in their political calculations to achieve what Aristotle's goal would be with the polis being the community, eudaimonia. I do not believe that, but I do believe there is some sort of whittled down, watered down extraction from ancient Greece of Aristotelian thinking that is being implanted into our current system. And this is dangerous. My friends, to have this idea that balance is a universal quality, or balance is the proper quality in a collaborative body, is to not pay attention to the moral values of certain propositions entirely. It is to understand those values maybe in a peripheral way, but it is to put a primary overarching moral value on the mechanism that you use to interact with those values rather than the values themselves. So, for example, if I think the Second Amendment is an absolute right, which I do, and that guns are the most efficient way in our century, in all of human history, for an individual man in their own capacity, and this is not counting armies or whatever, but even armies use guns, but for an individual man in their own capacity to defend themselves, if I believe that idea, my friends, and if I believe that's an extension of my natural rights, for me, there is no middle of the road. Let's have some more bureaucracy. Let's have some more background checks. Dude, you're trying to whittle down my access to that resource, even if you're doing so in the name of safety. And we can just debate the efficacy of background checks and everything later, but my point is this. The proposition of background checks or whatever is posed not as an independent value, but oftentimes through the lens of being bipartisan and having that balance between two ideas. I don't want necessarily to have a balance. If I understand, my friends, if I understand the value of a certain proposition, and that proposition is delineated and defined, sometimes there's no room for a balance if that proposition is to be upheld. Now the question is, Aristotle, going back to him, Aristotle does not believe in universal objective principles. For him, the entire pursuit of virtue is reliant on you. Now, there are certain things, obviously. You have to make sure that you're not overdoing certain things. You have to make sure you're not overcomplicating certain things. But for Aristotle, the pursuit of virtue is primarily up to you. What justice looks like in your life, of the self, is up to you. What courage looks like in your life is up to you. But my friends, if we just are circumstantial in our interaction with moral principles, then number one, we're kind of rebelling against the idea of the American experiment. The American experiment was absolutely not circumstantial. And this is more of a procedural issue than anything else. But number two, we're not allowing ourselves, again, to understand propositions in their fullest form. Or if we are, we're disregarding the possible efficacy or the possible benefit of propositions in their fullest form outside of the system of balance. So here's my point. Balance, bipartisanship in a certain chamber, just got us $1.9 trillion more in debt in a country whose currency is only held up by the thin approbations of our investors who believe in this metaphysical idea of the full faith in credit, which is every day being challenged by other currencies. $1.9 trillion in debt for a country who is well over $20 trillion and who has billions in unfunded liabilities, who is constantly borrowing to pay stuff. Balance just got us that. Here's my point, my friends. Don't let balance and don't let bipartisanship give you the value of a quantity. Don't do that. The value of a quantity should be predicated entirely on what the quantity contains. It should be predicated entirely on the values contained therein. Don't tell me about the middle of the road if you cannot tell me where the road goes. And this road right here, I don't want to be in the middle of it. I want to be off of it. Think on it. As always, my friends, I love you, and please, you better, well, first of all, if you can, support me on Patreon, patreon.com/officialcwatson. But otherwise, my friends, please, stay pensive.